Thank you very much, Estelle. Thank you very much, Jess. Wonderful presentations. Thank you all for staying on time. So now we have almost 30 minutes, for discussions. I think that's the part that everybody's expecting. But before that, our commercial message. I would like to thank, all the sponsors that have been supporting this initiative. It's thanks to them that we are here today. And I'd like to especially thank the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, which is a producer association, for being one of our silver sponsors. And also I'd like to remind you all that we are very active on the tweet. So if you could tweet, if you are a tweet user. How many of you are tweet users? Please raise your hand. How many of you became tweet users since, Donald Trump became a big tweeter? Not many of you. But please tweet hashtag GlobalBeef18, hashtag GlobalBeef18. That's the Twitter handle that we are using. And with no further delays, let's jump into the discussion. And since I have the microphone, I'm going to start with the first challenging questions to our panelists. And you have a microphone there. Please don't have to fight for that. Let's see who wants to take first this question, which is the following. I think, you all agree with me that based on all the presentations that we saw, one of the biggest challenges, that those initiatives face are the scaling up, right? Some of them are in the very early beginning, some of them are working with pilots. But I think all of them mention, that one of the challenges is how to scale up, how to take this to a larger number of members or producers or stakeholders. I think you all agree that we are only going to be able to improve and to make beef sustainable and to keep, beef as sustainable moving forward is if we manage to involve the producers that are below the average, right? That we manage to improve the people that are not the best performers, but the people that are the worst performers. Those are the ones that have to get better. So if you only reward the best performers, we are not promoting any changes. We may have to start working with the best performers, the most progressive, producers or stakeholders, but it's really important that we manage to get things to scale and especially reach the worst performers. So with that, my question is how we can learn faster, how we can learn more and faster from everything that have been implemented with pilots or have been implemented with the most progressive producers in order to take things to scale faster.
Why me? Okay.
You want to go first, Beatriz?
Number one. Okay. So this is a challenge, a huge challenge. You are correct. Well, I think the most important thing to keep on mind is to keep the producers, the productive sector on the table always. Sometimes I like the phrase that was used in one of the presentations on the opening sessions. There is, if we want to move faster, we go by ourselves, so we don't need to get all together. So to have everybody together, it will move slower, of course, but to have producers on the table all the time is important to validate the process. We have some beautiful models, we have some very, very good systems, very good models of standards of productions, but if we don't have producers to say it's feasible or not, we will be running in a direction that we are not sure if it will be feasible, if it will be sustainable along the time. So I think to move faster, we always need to have them together and as closer as we can. So all the efforts must be done to have producers in all partnerships, in all pilot projects, and producers' representatives on the strategies development. I think this is a good lesson to take in mind, maybe.
Juan Carlos, you want to come?
Yes. I think that I would like to use two words, easier and education. Why easier? Because to whom are we talking? We're talking to the people that live in the fields, cattlemen, and they like their way of life. They like what they have been doing for generations. So we have to give them a message that things could be done easier and with an easy model. And education also, why? Because if we give them easy things to learn, they would open their minds, and not only their minds, but also their kids' minds. So if we keep these kids in the fields, we would be able to keep production, and maybe even to introduce new technologies, because these kids are willing to have new technologies through all the world. And traceability is part of it, but it's just one part of it. So I think that I'll be using those two words, easy and education.
Please go ahead.
I would come back to something we had previously and make sure, as you say, the farmers and the producers are on board, and I guess they're the best one to talk about what works and what doesn't. So we have to make sure that they're convinced of what we are proposing or what we have as practices, and once they are convinced, they will be the best one to convince their peers and to move forward. I would say that's the main one for me.
I think I would back up what everybody said, really, to say probably that we should ensure that the value to the producers is always greater than the cost, and not necessarily just financial, but that what they're getting out of being involved is greater than what they might have to be spending in money or time to get there. So to really show them the benefits of being part of it. And again, coming back to the statement earlier about it might move a little bit slower if we go together, but actually the impact, if there's more of us moving, is greater than moving quickly and fewer people going with it.
Great. Beatriz, you want to compliment something?
I just remember another thing I consider important to move forward and to move faster is to recognize what have already been done. So if we recognize that, maybe more people can be easily engaged, because they can see some value of to promote change. So to recognize what have already been done is something very important for the sustainable development and the whole development of sector.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to open for questions. We already have one member of the audience that would like to ask a question. Please tell us your name, your organization, and then the question. So we're going to do the old style, guys. So don't worry about sending questions through the app, because we're going to do it through the microphone. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Mike Gooding, Map of Agriculture. These farmers who are perhaps take longer to change their behaviour, what we might know as sort of defender type farmers, often rely on third parties to help them make those decisions to see what might be better. And something that Jess said in her presentation, she talked specifically about the challenges of the veterinary professionals and getting them to work in these initiatives. Perhaps, Jess, you could expand on that. Is that just vets you have a problem with, or are there lessons that we need to learn about all of those people who might help those farmers understand the opportunities?
I think it's not about having a problem with vets. I think it's that we, as Red Tractor, have farmers that are our members. So when it comes to communication, there are lots of methods of communication we can use to target farmers because they are our members. In making changes to standards on antibiotics, it's the vets that are prescribing the antibiotics, but they're not members of Red Tractor. Therefore, the communication challenge is a different one because we don't have the direct route to veterinary surgeons or veterinary databases, and we know that there are vet organisations, but that not all vets are members of those organisations. So there are always, always easier vet practices or vets to communicate with because they are members of those groups. But then those that are not can be more difficult to target because we don't have those direct communication channels.
Anyone else want to take that? Okay, good. Any other questions? We have one here at the front. I think it's from Rabourdin, right?
Thanks. Yes, I'm Justin Sherrard. A question for Estelle. Estelle, great to hear about the initiative. I want to ask you two things about the program. The first is you set a target, I think, of 15% reduction over the next decade and said it's quite an ambitious target. I wonder how ambitious you're actually being and whether you're being ambitious enough. You're sort of looking towards 2030 and the time frame of the Paris Climate Change Agreement. And I think the countries that you refer to have all got more ambitious targets for emissions reductions over that time period than the 15% that you're talking about. So, is that enough, I think would be my first question to you. And secondly, at the moment, where do you think you're going to find these reductions? Is it in animal husbandry? Is it in feed management, feed additives, etc.? Can you just expand a little bit more on where you see the reductions actually coming from? Thank you.
I will do my best to answer your question, but I've unfortunately not been the one who set the targets. Anyway, you're true, it might not be, we could see it as a not ambitious enough target, but I guess your second question is also answering to why we're not able to give a more ambitious target, is that we know that there is no one solution, not one easy one, but the addition of various impacts that we have to work on. One of the main impacts on carbon emissions, we all know, is the fact that the cattle is a ruminant and that we don't plan to change it. So that's why we are there. But there are a number of a great list of mitigation tools or actions that can work. So it can be everything that you listed, from the feed to also the grassland management, but also to the manure management. There are many things that can be worked on, and I don't have one way of getting there. If we talk about France, we know that there are more differences between farmers that are having the same type of farm than between the different types of farms. So that means that we have really a lot to do, but putting all the small things together, we should be able to bring those 15%, knowing that if we can do better, we will anyway do better. So I don't have one answer to your question. I'm sorry for that.
Any other questions? We have one over there.
Hi, Francisco from National Wildlife Federation in Brazil. Estelle, you told us about the success number of direct contracts you have with producers, and this is kind of a dream for us in Brazil, but we always have, hear from producers blaming meat packers and meat packers blaming producers, and they don't move forward with these. We cannot, can't do this. So I want to know what were the key factors of your success there. Thank you.
First, it's been quite a long journey. So we started 15 years ago, and we can say that we can measure the success maybe for the last 5 to 7 years, so it's been quite a long journey before we get there. I would say the first way of success was transparency, that we've been able to sit around the table, start with few number of farmers, but being open and in each one's position. The second thing is be able to take a risk on the future, because the contracts we have, we make a deal with the farmer that he will bring us his cattle, but we ensure the price he will get for this cattle in 1 year. So it's really like a bet on the future that we do together. But as soon as we are consistent, and that's why I guess it took a few years, is that for each other to learn from the other. So we've been able to say, to be there 1 year after the other, even if we were above the market, but the aim was for us to have a win-win. So some years we are above, some years we're below. But at the end, what is important is that we are there every year. And I guess that after a few years, the farmers are quite happy with this solution, where they have some visibility 1 year ahead of what they will get for as money for their cattle. They don't aim to have their whole farm in contract. They want a part of it, but that's kind of a security they have. So that's, I guess, the key learnings. And during the break, there is my colleague Matthew, who is in charge of the contracts here, so he will give you many more other good reasons to go there.
So before we jump into another question from the audience, I have one question related to that, which is the question of business cases. So I'm going to mention two examples of projects that I had the chance to visit in Colombia and in Brazil. So the Novo Campo project from Brazil and the El Atico from Colombia, where the business cases were documented. And they were quite impressive. El Atico, they are even measuring the carbon from the soils, and they got to the conclusion that they are neutral, they are carbon neutral. And the farm is making double profitability than a regular, beef and dairy farm in Colombia. Correct me if I'm wrong, Juan Carlos?
No, that's right.
And the Novo Campo project also has impressive data showing reductions of carbon emissions by more than 40–50%. Some pastures even reach 90%. 80% reductions in carbon emissions, with profitability going above the roof, right? Improvements of 300% or more. So very strong business cases, well documented. So the question is, what is the role of the business cases? Are we promoting those business cases enough? Someone mentioned the importance of producers telling their story to their peers instead of us, NGOs or banks or retailers doing that. So are we using that tool? Are we documenting enough business cases, I think is the first question. And are we using enough? Are we promoting those business cases enough? Or the producers are promoting those business cases, at the level they should be promoted?
Well, the answer for both questions, in my opinion, is no. We are not documenting enough good business cases, and we are also not taking benefits from its communication. So, of course, sometimes we have some complex issue, and then we just don't believe that it's really possible to solve it. So those business cases, they show us that it's possible, but we keep believing that, okay, it is possible in this environment, or maybe if we just communicate this in a large scale, we cannot support this for a scale-up dimension. I don't know. I think sometimes I talk to so many different people in Brazil, and then sometimes I ask, why don't we communicate this business case more? Because, maybe it's not possible in large scale, maybe it's not possible to keep happening on the same way, and maybe we just don't want to show something that will not be possible for everybody. I don't agree integrally with this, But I think, of course, we need to do this more. For example, this case in Novo Campo project is a very, very good business case that we can create other related business case with this project, because it's a part of the process, and we need to generate more information related to the other part. For example, this project is for finishing animals, and then we can aggregate information doing the same process for calf production, for example, integrating this in those intensive systems. So we can generate more information from those business cases, and I think we are still failing on that. Of course, we can get better on this.
I think the case that you're telling about, El Latico, is well known. What happened is that it's well known, but it has been developed through many years. Several generations of this family have been working in this place with silvopastoral intensive systems, introducing native trees, native grasses, and some well-done practices also. But what happened is that maybe there are some other similar productions, similar places to this, but not as well documented as this one. So I think that if people reply this, but they also have been able to document this as well, things are going to be much better, because they're going to be telling everyone what good practices have been doing. Not only to look for a certificate, because maybe people are trying to have clean productions, or green productions, or some sustainable productions, willing to have a certificate. But sometimes, and I've talked with several cattlemen in Colombia, and they are looking for good practices, well-done practices in their ranches, not only for receiving a certificate, but in order to know all of their costs in their balance sheets. So it is very important to handle information, to be able to have information. And not many people are able to build this up, and neither to show everyone their balance sheet. El Latico is a different case, because they even show your balance sheet.
Good. You like to?
I guess maybe in the continuity of the beef carbon initiative, there is a project to work on, let's say, a carbon foundation or something, where the farmer could bring carbon credits because he's saving some carbon emissions. Then some companies could buy those credits, and that's a way also to, I guess, help sustainability to get more value also. So that's something, that's a way to work on it also.
Good. Jess,
I think just to, I think there is always room for more sort of case studies of good practice and sort of peer-to-peer learning. So for people to be able to learn from one another on what works and what doesn't work, and what the challenges have been on any particular farm, and how they've overcome them. I think there's always room for more of that.
Great, thank you. So let's take the final question, and then we go to the breakout session. I think she has the microphone.
Hi, Camila Camar from WWF Colombia. Recognizing that each context is different, I'm wondering how you are addressing biodiversity principle beyond the mission discussion. And I would like to each of you develop a little bit on that.
So what are you doing beyond greenhouse gas emissions, especially biodiversity, right, Camille?
Okay, well, from a red tractor perspective, we talk about environmental protection within the scheme, so protecting the environment from harm, so talking about integrated crop management, etc., within the standards. But, you know, again, if going back to Nicola's presentation from an ERBS point of view, the principles that were arrived at for what the ERBS would focus on was shortened to a handful of topics just to make it more achievable so that we could actually make real progress in particular areas. But biodiversity is certainly on the list. It's just not been pulled out as one of the key ones we need to focus on initially.
I guess to complete what you just said, the way we proceed with the European Roundtable is that we did what we call a materiality analysis of the environmental impact, so going to stakeholders and trying to understand within Europe and from really various stakeholders what are the priorities. So we picked up, let's say, 4, which are animal welfare, animal antibiotics use, greenhouse gas emissions and the farm management, but those are only the 4 top of the list, but there are many others behind, so it doesn't mean that we are not taking those into account. It's mainly trying to focus on those and then be able to work to and progress with the others also. So there are many other items we can work on for sure.
It's weird answering this to Camila because she knows much of this in Colombia than me. But I think that the National Action for Appropriate Mitigation is part of it, built through many years, since 2015 that we signed it. And also the Zero Deforestation Convention, also signed by Colombia, in order to decrease deforestation throughout the country. I think that those are 2 of the most important things that we have been doing in Colombia.
So, what we are doing to go beyond the GHG emissions mitigations, I think that a good way to answer this is to talk a little bit about the GIPS, the Guide of Indicator for Sustainable Livestock Development. To develop the GIPS was our way to answer and to define that sustainable production cannot be defined by one criteria, or no of the criteria can be more important than the others. So we have 5 principles as the Global Roundtable also have, and we are also working hard on other principles and other criteria. GHG emissions is very, very important, and it is inside the environmental principle. But for Brazilian reality, we also need to consider other criteria and other issues that are most demanded. So, for example, management inside the property for us is something very important. If we consider that sustainability is the capacity of keep doing what you are doing on the same way or on a better way for long years, so if your business are not viable, it will not be sustainable in a few years. So the second principle is communities and the good and bad impacts that your activity has on communities. The third one is the relationship with your workers, and this includes some capacity building, of course legislation compliance, and we have the 4th principle, there is environment, and we consider water, GHG emissions, deforestation, and other soil management, whatever. And the 5th one is the relationship among the value chain. So some practices that you do inside your property, such as animal welfare, animal health, or use of some products that are not allowed for market or whatever. And those activities that you do inside your property can affect all the value chain. So the market, the consumers, the image of your products. So we are going much longer beyond the GHG emissions, and we are working hard to show that sustainable product cannot be defined by one criteria, even if it's zero deforestation, GHG emissions, or whatever.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very proud of my panelists. Now we're going to go for a breakout. So there are going to be refreshments outside. And then in 20 minutes, we're going to come back here. We're going to have this session again. Unless you really love, the session, you are more than welcome to stay. But I'm sure there are 2 other very exciting panels that you want to join after break. And please help me in thanking our panelists. Thank you.